So you've gotten the cutest vintage pattern, but it is not in your size. Let me help you with that. I'm Bronwen. Welcome to Queen Deluxe. Let's do some vintage sewing. I'm gonna jump right in. I bought this super cute 1950s pattern with these sort of slacks. It is a size 14 with a bust of 32 and a waist of 26, and the hip is down at the bottom, so you can see all of the sizes that this pattern came in, and of course I have this almost the smallest. So the hip is 35. So what I need to do is write my measurements down, the pattern's measurements, and then the difference. So I'm basically subtracting the pattern's measurements from my measurements, and that's how much I need to add to my pattern. The next step is to trace all the pieces of the pattern. This is a good thing to do when you have a vintage pattern. I would do this in pencil. I'm using a pen just so that you guys can see it on camera. I'm trying to be as careful as possible not to mark up my original pattern. Keep it in the best condition possible. I'm marking all the notches, all the indicators, all the little punches, everything, and I'm trying to lay it out as flat as possible. Anything that might be ripped or folded under, I'm trying to, make it as accurate as I possibly can. This weird shape is the pocket piece, so it ends up being a facing and the pocket. I'll show you later how it works and how that becomes a pocket. I'm going to connect all the dots and learn what all these little indicators mean. So I'm going to name it pocket. I'm going to put the straight of grain and all of the little, connect all the dots that need to be connected. So there is a facing that ends up going on the top of this pocket out of whatever you make the pants of. And then the rest of the pocket will be like a lining or pocketing. This is the straight of grain, so I'm marking that. Putting my arrows on. I want to make sure that all of these indications end up transferring so that I'm not later looking for a notch or a mark and it's not there. Now I am marking the seam allowance. I'm doing a trick that I do in theater all the time, and I'm taking the seam allowance off of my pattern piece. This will make it easier to do any pattern alterations that have to happen later on. This is not something you have to do. This is something that I do. You can, of course, leave your seam allowances on if that's what you're used to. Now I'm going to transfer the notch marks down to my new no seam allowance line so that those don't get cut away when I cut the piece out. Now I'm going to cut it out. So I'm going to cut on my cut line or my no seam allowance line. I'm going to be as careful as possible so that I'm not changing the shape at all. As you can see, this is quite a bit of work just to make one pocket pattern. I have been putting off expanding this pattern for quite some time. But in reality, it really doesn't take that long. I think it took about 20 minutes to really trace everything out. So here's my new pattern piece with all of the markings on it, and I'm just double checking that everything is there and it's ready to go. I repeat this process for the rest of the pattern pieces. Overview of what we're going to be doing. So I've made a little miniature of some generic pant pieces, and I'm going to talk about how we're going to do this. So I have it marked in I put 3 vertical lines on where we're going to split. It usually is sort of around where the dart area is, and then you will end up pushing those guys out to your measurements to expand the piece. So on the back, it is around the dart and in the little crotch area. And then you can also expand on these horizontal lines to make it longer in the leg, or if you have a long waist, you can cut up at the top and make that longer. It's completely customizable to your measurements. All right, so we have our numbers from like the original pattern, our numbers, the difference. Now we're going to take that to paper. have my front pant pieces and my back pant piece, and that equals only half of the body, right? So we got one front and one back. So we're really gonna divide our difference numbers by 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, to get how much we need to expand our pattern. So I've divided my waist by 4, 1 and 1/16, and the hip by 4, which is 1 1/2. So now I'm prepping my back pant piece. I have drawn the lines on around the dart. So now I split it, and now I'm gonna just put paper in to those sections. So here we go. I'm going to mark my 1/2 inch line away from my piece there. And then I have that crotch line that's going horizontally. So I'm going to mark that across so that I'm making sure that it's staying in line and it's not going to drop and change the crotch depth. So I have expanded on each of my lines, and I've added my little 1/16 of an inch at the waist here. Now we are going to address our little bumps, our little mountains and valleys that end up happening when you slash and spread. So I am kind of evening those out with my pen, just freehand. You can use a French curve or a hip curve if you would like. Now I'm marking what this pattern is. I am putting no seam allowance on there, so I don't forget that I didn't add seam allowance on here. It's for me, Bronwen, and I made it in 2001. I find it's good to put a date on them. All right, now just time to cut it out, and here it is all finished, all taped up. I have lengthened it as well for my crazy long legs. It's ready to go. Okay, so I am planning out how we're gonna get my front piece bigger. So this is the front crotch line. This is the inseam, hem, outseam, and this is that weird pocket section that sticks out on the side. And then this is the front waist right here. Okay, so there are no darts on this pattern piece, which is nice. So I'm gonna say that I'm gonna need to divide it here, here. So I'm gonna take a straight line. Excuse me, I don't have a ruler handy. And right here. So these lines are gonna come apart. So I have 3 lines. So my hip, the measurement we need to expand is 1.5 inches, which is nice because divided by 3, that would be 1/2 inch here, 1/2 inch here, and 1/2 inch here. Now my waist isn't quite 1.5 inches, it's only 1 inch and 1/16. So if I put 1/2 inch here and 1/2 inch here, that would be 1 inch, and I would only have 1/16 left. So I could just sneak it like maybe right in here. Okay, so that's my plan. I hope that makes sense. Okay, so I've expanded the front and the back, and I have some waist facings that are rectangles, so I've just added on to those, so that was easy. But then I have my funky pocket facing. So this is a facing and a pocket at the same time. So what happens is this guy ends up folding like this and will be sort of inside there. So this guy is going to finish off that section and be part of the waistband. It's a little hard to imagine how that all works, but it works, it's cool. And then, so I've been having to expand that when I lay here, that line just matches up right there. And then there's a line on the other side that matches. So I've split it and opened it up an inch. And now it's big enough for my giant phone. So that's nice. Mock-up time. So now I'm going to test the pattern to make sure that my enlargements make sense and are not doing anything funky. So I'm cutting it out of an extra fabric that I have that's a pretty good weight to test the pants and sewing it up really quick. I'm not putting a waistband in or doing any finishing. It's just a really quick test. A little bit of... depending on how I stand. I think I want to take in the leg a little bit. Maybe the front. Like I put too much in that little bit of a crotch curve. And if I take that out, That'll fix that. And maybe take in the leg at the bottom just a bit. It's not terrible, but I think fits nicely at the waist. And the back, from what I can tell, we have a little bit of slouchy butt, but that's like normal in a 1950s pattern. I don't know if I want to take that out. So I think I'm going to do that. Shorten this. There was a half an inch in there. So I have moved it back to 1/4, and then that made that stick out 1/4 of an inch. So I have trimmed that off, and then I just kept going all the way down to the hem, so that this hem is now 1/4 inch shorter. And then I have sort of marked a line with my bad marker here, a half an inch at the bottom of the hem on the back, because that was the front. And it goes up to about here. So I'm just tapering the inside of the leg, and that'll bring that in. So that's what I'm doing, and hopefully that'll be enough to fix everything that I want. All right, some things I want to touch on before I let you go. Truing up your pattern. This is a vocabulary word that means that you need to make sure that like your side seams match up. So you're going to actually walk them. You're going to put one piece on top of the other and make sure that they match up. They're the same measurement in length. You can do that with your inseam and your outseam, your waistbands, anything that like fits together. You want to make sure that the pattern is accurate from when you transferred it from tissue paper to brown paper. When sizing up your pattern or sizing down, you can use these same techniques to size down a pattern as well. But if your sizes are a lot bigger than your pattern, you might want to take it in incremental steps. So you would do the first bigger and then get that all worked out on a fresh piece of paper, and then split that one to be larger as well. It might go better. The more that we expand or contract our patterns, they can get warped, and they're gonna maybe take more mock-ups, okay? But I hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks for sewing with me today. If you did enjoy yourself or learn something, please hit that subscribe, pass it along with a friend, hit all the links and all the buttons and all the things. Okay, I'll see you next time. Bye!
Welcome to Queen Deluxe. Let's do some vintage sewing.